Well, thank you for joining us this evening. Um, we're here to learn a little bit more about homeschooling. And we're fortunate to have a panel of experienced homeschooling parents from the Connecticut Homeschool Alliance, and they're going to share with us some tips and some advice on how to homeschool. So I would like to introduce you to Rebecca Champion, and Rebecca is one of the founders of Connecticut Homeschool Alliance and one of the administrators, and she is a homeschooling parent of a 9-year-old son. And so, Rebecca, I'm going to turn things over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Rebecca. I am one of the founders of the Connecticut Homeschool Alliance. On behalf of our group, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all of you here and to thank Elaine and the Mark Twain Library for inviting us here to share with you. The Connecticut Homeschool Alliance was founded in 2020 by a group of homeschoolers looking to change the face of home education in Connecticut. When people think of homeschooling, they often have a particular image that comes to mind, but that image is not really representative of the true diversity that exists in the homeschooling community. There are homeschoolers of all races, religions, socioeconomic statuses, backgrounds, family structures, and at CHA, we welcome, encourage, and support all Connecticut homeschoolers. We believe our diversity is our strength and that knowledge and representation matter. Our Facebook group is a great place to get legal info, connect with other homeschoolers, ask questions, get support, find events and opportunities around the state. A lot of the information we cover tonight can be found on our Facebook page, but we also encourage you to screenshot these slides as they're coming up. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and our panelists will answer them. And one last note, so we are going to be talking about some legal information tonight. Everything will only be relevant to Connecticut because homeschool laws vary state to state, so this is Connecticut specific. So now we can introduce our panel of speakers. Casey?
Hi, I'm a homeschooling mom of 6 kids aged 2 to 11, and I live in central Connecticut in Meriden. And I've been homeschooling since my 11-year-old was about 3 because she was one of those kids who really wanted to learn.
Hi, my name is Cecilia, and I homeschool my 2 kids, ages 9 and 7, and we live in southeastern Connecticut.
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm a homeschool mom in southwestern Connecticut. I'm in Monroe. I have a 12-year-old son who is in 8th grade, and I have a 15-year-old daughter who is in 10th grade, and she actually just went back into public school this year. So I'm just homeschooling my son.
Hi, I'm Kim. I'm from Avon, Connecticut, and I homeschool my 4 kids. My oldest is in 6th grade all the way down, and we've been homeschooling since the very beginning.
So we're going to start right off with making the decision to homeschool, which is a huge decision. All of us are, I think, I know for speaking for myself, I thought about it a lot for a really, really long time. I did a lot of research. And there were a lot of questions that popped up when I was thinking about homeschooling. And some of them were, do I have time for this? And if you are a working parent, or if you and your spouse both work, you're definitely wondering if you have time for this. The good news is that you are in complete control of your schedule when you're homeschooling. So when and how you homeschool is going to look different for every family. You know, if you're working Monday through Friday and you want to homeschool, if you want to homeschool on the weekends, then you can absolutely do that. If you want to homeschool in the evenings, you can do that too. So It might take some time to really find your groove and find when you can work best with your kiddos, but it's definitely doable. Other questions might be, how do I know if my kids are learning? How will I know to teach something I wasn't very good at in school? This is something I think we all struggle with also. We live in such a good time to be homeschoolers right now. There are so many resources that are available to us. You know, if you're feeling like I did, that maybe you're not very strong in math or science, there are endless resources to help you along the way. There are definitely free resources like the local library that can help you out. A lot of us rely on other homeschool parents that do have a specialty, maybe someone who was or is currently a math teacher or a science teacher. You know, there's lots of different resources out there that can help you. So I don't think that should ever be a reason to say, I can't homeschool. One thing that we all homeschoolers have in common is that we really have a desire to help our children, and so we will reach out and use any resources that we can find to make sure that our kids are getting the education that they deserve. And that brings me to whether or not, you know, you're able to afford homeschooling. Homeschooling can be anywhere from free to extremely expensive. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we talk about curriculum. But there are many different resources, and most expensive does not mean best. So if you are worried about how much homeschooling will cost, I would say that you know, going to a group like Connecticut Homeschool Alliance is a great way to talk to other parents and find out what's out there. And where can I find support? My answer would be the same, is to go to a group like Connecticut Homeschool Alliance. There are parents who have been doing this for a very long time and are more than happy to, you know, share all of those special tips or to talk about curriculum, things like that. So, you know, it's a great place to meet other homeschoolers, but also get support from them. So next I'm going to turn it over to Cecilia, and she's going to talk about the legal side of homeschooling in Connecticut.
Yeah, the Connecticut General Statute, Section 184 states that all parents and those who have the care of children shall bring them up in some lawful and honest employment and instruct them or cause them to be instructed in reading, writing, spelling, English grammar, geography, arithmetic, and United States history, and in citizenship, including a study of the town, state, and federal governments. So basically, the statute says that you can homeschool your children in Connecticut, and if you choose to do so, you are in charge of your child's education. But the rest of the statute pertains to children enrolled in public school. So yeah, you have the right to homeschool your child. In the next slide, we have the steps to be able to begin to homeschool. To be able to homeschool in Connecticut, you have to notify the school district, and all you have to do is you write a letter of withdrawal. In Connecticut Homeschool Alliance on our Facebook group, you can find a sample letter. So you just can copy that into a file and print it. And what you do is you hand deliver this letter to the school district. You ask for them to sign it and date it and to give you a photocopy of that, they, you know, stating that they received it. Or you can send it by mail, the certified letter. Either way, once they receive this letter, you are officially homeschooling. Now, some districts may ask for a notice of intent or an NOI, but this is just suggested procedure. There are no legal requirements in the state of Connecticut to fill out a notice of intent. You can respectfully decline, or for example, when when I began homeschooling my oldest, I didn't know that the notice of intent was not a requirement, and I filed it. And in the notice of intent also, there's a suggestion that you may be requested, that you may be asked to participate in a portfolio, but you don't have to do that either. When I filed a notice of intent, I simply filed it and there was never a follow-up from my school district. But I know that some school districts may ask you may send you the notice of intent, even if you send a letter of withdrawal. You don't have to fill it out. It's your choice, really. And in my case, they never asked me for a portfolio, so it's been fine. And then with my second child, I he did pre-K, and when I withdrew him with a letter of withdrawal, and it's been fine. So, either way you want to do it. But the notice of intent is not a requirement, and you can just fill out the letter of withdrawal. A quick reminder that this is only necessary if you're going to homeschool. If you're doing distance learning, you don't need to do that because you're still enrolled in the public school system. Homeschooling and distance learning are not the same thing.
So before we go any further, I do want to take just a moment to talk to anyone who's homeschooling just because of the pandemic. There's a few things that you want to be aware of if you feel like I'm going to homeschool this year, but I plan on sending them back to public school next year or whenever it's safe, or whenever you feel comfortable doing that. If you were receiving any services, an IEP or a 504 plan from the school, that stops as soon as you start homeschooling. And those services will not automatically be there when you decide to enroll your child back into public school. So just something that you want to be aware of. It's not a reason not to homeschool. It's just that when you do decide to return to public school, one of the first things that you're going to want to do is talk to someone about getting those services again, about getting an IEP or getting a 504 plan. If you have children that are in kindergarten through 8th grade, they are going to go back to their age appropriate grade. So there really isn't much that the school is going to ask you about. At least that's been our experience. For high schoolers, it's a little bit different. It's possible that the high school is going to ask your child to take tests to see the appropriate classes that they can go into, or they're going to ask for some sort of transcript while you've been homeschooling. So this is really for 9th through 12th grade. Every district is different. So you're really going to want to talk to your district if you're going to be homeschooling a high schooler. And you might find that you might prefer for your child to actually stay in public school for high school. It can be a bit tough trying to deal with the high school and what credits they're going to accept. They might really heavily question what you were doing while you were homeschooling and whether or not that equals a high school credit. So again, if you have a high schooler that you would like to homeschool, I highly recommend talking to the high school or your district about what the plan is for accepting high schoolers that have been homeschooled back into public school. I'm going to talk about deschooling in just a little bit, but before I get to it, I just want to say that it might look a little bit different for anyone who's COVID homeschooling, only because deschooling can sometimes last for a very long period of time, depending on how long you want to do it. And I know that anyone who's just homeschooling for this year might want to really just jump into academic work. I would suggest not skipping the deschooling part, that there's benefits to it, even if you're just homeschooling for 1 year. So I think that that's really important, but I'll talk about that in a few minutes. If you know that your child will go back to school next year, you are probably you're going to want to stay on top of whatever they would have been doing in public school. I think that it makes for an easier transition if your child is kind of up to speed and has been covering the same topics that other kids in public school have been covering. So if there's a teacher that you can talk to, or if there's other parents or your child's friend that you can kind of touch base with and say, what have they been doing in science? What have they been doing social studies? You might want to kind of keep them on track. You're still in control of the schedule, you're in control of the curriculum, but you might want to just be aware of the topic so that your child isn't completely lost when they go back into public school.
Christina, I just wanted to add that is all on the district websites as well. For the state of Connecticut, each school district has to supply their course of study online. So if you are curious about that, if you go to your district website, usually you can find it somewhere in there what they would be learning that year, at least the generalized topics.
Yep. Thanks for mentioning that, Kim. So on to deschooling. So first, I want to mention that there is something called deschooling and there is something called unschooling, and often people get them confused. So I just want to touch on what unschooling is exactly, because it is different from deschooling. So unschooling is a style of homeschooling. It's actually kind of a lifestyle where you are really kind of following your child's lead. And kind of you're acting as the facilitator. So whatever your child is interested in, you're really helping them to kind of pursue that. Deschooling, on the other hand, is something that folks that are leaving public school to homeschool, it's a period of time where you are really taking a break from traditional schooling. You're not giving your child any formal academic work. It's a time to really get to know your child and see how they learn best. It's suggested that you deschool 1 month for every year that your child was in public school. To be perfectly honest with you, that was hard for me. I had my kids in public school until they were in 2nd and 4th grade, and I felt like we cannot take the time to deschool. We just need to keep going. And that was a huge disaster because my kids were unhappy, and I tried doing school at home, sorry. And we really needed that break to sort of reset and say, this is what homeschooling is going to look like. I needed to understand how my kids learned best. And I really just needed to get to know them. They had been in school for so many hours during the day that I really needed that time to check in with them and just get to know them and see what they love doing and what they were passionate about. So deschooling is going to look different for every family. You may, get outdoors a lot, do a lot in nature. You may read books together. You might watch movies together. Your kids might go off and play on electronics. It's really going to look different for everyone. And I would suggest that you really want to ease into getting into academic work when you feel like you're done deschooling, because what you might realize is that you think that you're completely done deschooling, you're ready to start academic work with your kids, you're excited about a new curriculum that you got, but you might find that maybe they're not quite ready. And that was definitely the case for us. One of my children needed to take a little more time off of writing. School had been particularly traumatic for him. He had a really low self-esteem and felt he wasn't a good writer. My daughter felt like reading was horrible. And so while we moved on and started some formal academic work, there were other subjects that we did continue to deschool with.
Yeah, you know, Christina, for us, that period was very important it was kind of a period to heal also, you know, from the stress and anxiety that, at least for my son, it was when he was in school. When I withdrew my oldest, he was in kindergarten. That was 3 years ago. And we day schooled actually for 6 months. And, you know, we took that period to reconnect with him, you know, the whole family, and to help him. He was feeling very insecure about himself too. And that period really helped him heal. We read books a lot. We went to the library a lot. The library is your best friend. And, you know, we picked books that he was interested in and we read those. We did activities that he and his little brother would, you know, show interest in. Like they started speaking about what they were interested. So we pursued that and we helped them. We provided them with materials that they needed. We did a lot of science experiments. We went outdoors a lot, hiking, things like that. We went to a lot of museums. You know, right now it's hard because of COVID, but yeah, we did a lot of things that it didn't look like it was a formal education. You know, we were taking time to deschool, but they were learning so much. And we didn't do formal lessons until 4 months into deschooling, and it was math. We were getting worried about math. But it was very informal and they were more, he was more relaxed, so he didn't mind. I also did take this time also to do research on homeschooling styles, homeschool philosophy, you know, curricula. And I started observing his way of learning, like Christina was mentioning. So I was able to see what kind of teaching style would work better, and also what worked best, what worked for us as a family too, because if I didn't like it, it wasn't going to work either. So it was a team effort. And I always mention that every time that we have found that the materials we're using or the curriculum we're using isn't working, because that happens, we take time to deschool, like not necessarily 6 months. I mean, during COVID times, we have been a little more relaxed, very relaxed actually. But if something is not working out, you can take another period to deschool and, you know, to figure out what changes need to happen, and, you know, to then continue and work. You don't have to be stressing all the time about, oh no, but we got to keep going. You know, deschooling works throughout. I've been doing this 3 years only. It's not a lot, but we can take moments to deschool in between. And okay, so what does your typical day look like? I always say a typical day looks different with every homeschool family. It will depend on your family specific needs and what are your priorities. Do you work or not? What kind of schedule works best for you and your family? And it will also depend on what you want to, you know, whether you want to follow your child's interest, or do you want to follow a more traditional education approach? So it does look different for every family.
I would encourage you, if after you think of the logistics of how you're going to do this, like, you know, time, schedule, are you working, things like that, I would encourage you to think about your philosophy of education, which sounds like a lot, but it's really boils down to, how do you believe that learning happens? Are you a sit down at the table with some textbooks family? Are you an outside exploring nature family? Are you a learning happens naturally in life family? Um, it helps if you ask yourself what how you're wanting this to look like. What are your goals? Um, some people like to just think about this. Some people like to, get one of those planners or a notebook and write them down, what your goals are, long term, short term, your philosophy, um, so that you can make sure that the homeschooling that you're doing matches up with how you want this to look. You might find that otherwise you veer off into something that really isn't working for your family, or isn't looking the way that you had hoped that it would.
I wanted to add, yeah, that for example, a typical day in my home, for some people, it might be like, where's the structure? Where's the every morning and from this time to that time, the lessons. We, in our family, we believe that learning happens all the time. And for my husband and I, has been very important that when the kids are engaged in something that they chose to do, we do not interrupt them. And my kids are very busy in the mornings. So, we wake up and they immediately go and work on projects that they have. And they have a ton of projects working on. And sometimes they'll work with 2 projects that they have, building projects, writing stories, reading a book, art, sometimes something that I can't even describe because I don't understand it. But, and then, later on, so we don't interrupt them when they're doing that. I won't be like, okay, well, I have to do lessons, so let's do it. In my case, I just let them. They eventually stop, are hungry, and and then they want to go outside, or they grab something else, but they stay where I am. And at that point, they allow me to read aloud the books that we're working on. We do a lot of literature. We are literature based curricula. Like we're not a one homeschool style only. So, but we do a lot of reading. And we do a mix of fiction books, nonfiction, we do poetry, memorization. And, later on, that we do some work like spelling, copy work, maybe some science, history, or art, depending on what they're interested in. And my husband does math. So my husband works full time, and when he gets home, at whatever time he gets home, he does math. And sometimes we do lessons on the weekend. Like you don't also your schedule, for us in our typical day is very fluid. And, we don't do school Monday through Friday. Sometimes we do it in the weekends. Sometimes we do 3 days or 4 days out of the week. So, you do what works best for you. And it changes. Like this wasn't always the way that we homeschooled. I was way more structured in the beginning, but it wasn't working out. And my kids were getting a little, feisty. And we just evolve with time.
We have a very different typical day, in that ours is kind of reversed. So my son, if you try to get him to sit down and do something in the afternoon, like there's no point. So he gets up, and he gets up very early. I'm not an early riser, but he's up, so I'm up. So he gets up, we have breakfast, and then we immediately sit down at the dining room table and like bang out the stuff that needs to be done at the table, like writing, math, things like that. It doesn't take very long. There's a misconception that you need to do 6 hours of homeschooling. If you've been in public school, it's like a 6-hour day. nobody homeschools for 6 hours a day. There's no way. It takes us max a couple of hours. He's done, before lunchtime. And then he's got the whole rest of the day to do his projects. Like Cecilia's kids, my son always has he's got something in the works all the time. So we're a little bit backwards in that way but you'll find that every family is going to have a different typical day, and none of them are better or worse or right or wrong. It just depends on what works for you guys.
Yeah, so I have 6 kids and I don't have any typical days. Like every day is very different. But because I need to have everything written down, I have planners, and I just recently started printing off like sheets that list every hour of the day, so I can at least aim to do things in a somewhat structured manner, because otherwise it'll all fall apart and I won't get anything done, and I'll get overwhelmed and just like do dishes and clean all day. So I am trying to be way more structured, just kind of to survive with 6 kids and homeschooling. So it's not that every day we follow any sort of flow necessarily, but I just base it on what's going on that day. Do we have any Zoom calls? If I wake up and I'm extra tired, well, we're going to shift it because mommy's tired. Like, so just being flexible is really important for us.
I'm the same as Casey in that I need a lot of external structure in my life to function well. Otherwise, I'm kind of a mess. My son also needs a lot of external structure in his day. He needs to know what he's coming. He needs to know what to expect. So that worked out well for us. But I found out after a while, too long, really, of banging my head against the wall, that even though the kind of structure that we needed was the same, my teaching style did not at all mesh with my son's learning style. So those are 2 things that you need to think about when you're homeschooling too. How do you naturally teach, and how does your child naturally learn? So for example, it makes sense to me to explain something out loud, or to have my son read something, or sort of prompting questions until he like discovers it on his own. But no, it does not work for him. I need to, and I was trying to make it work for him, and he just doesn't learn that way. So if we're going to do a new science experiment or a new type of math word problem, I can't just tell him or have him read the directions. I have to show an example. I have to show him how it works. And that took, like I said, it took a while to work that out. But once it clicked, things got so much easier. So definitely take some time to figure out how you teach, how your kids learn, make that mesh so that it, can really work.
So the same thing happened to me, Rebecca. My son was having a really hard time learning how to read, learning his sight words, and just wanting to sit down and practice them with me. Every time I'd mention it, he would just break down and start crying. And we did that for about a year, because I'm like, you have to learn how to read. We just need to struggle through this together. And that probably wasn't the best approach. But this year, for some reason, it clicked. He loves Nerf guns, and he especially loves seeing how the suction cup Nerf gun bullets stick to everything. So I always find them in random spots as high on the window. He wants to know how long they'll stay up there. And I'm like, this is what we need to do. So what I do now is I write all his sight words on our whiteboard, and he gets to pick from his arsenal of Nerf guns, and whatever word he shoots, then he has to say it. And then he walks around and he erases it, and he goes back to the other side of the room and he shoots another word. And he's now excited to do his sight words because he gets to play with his Nerf guns at the same time. And it was just one of those things that took me a while to figure out what clicked for him. And it's not that he couldn't do the work, it was just not interesting enough for him, and he needed to be able to move. I had figured out earlier that during math, he just couldn't sit there very long. So, when he started hitting a wall there, I'd have him do a math problem and then go run around the house one time and then sit down and do another math problem. Or in the winter, we actually installed a rock wall in our playroom, which is right off of where we do our schoolwork. And so do a math problem, go up and down the rock wall, come back down, sit and do another math problem. And it takes us a little bit longer, but they can get through it and they can focus so much better just by doing that, by moving their bodies a little bit. And then my other daughter, or my daughter, is the total opposite. She's very visual and auditory. So she would much rather go sit in her room and do her work by herself or listen to an audiobook instead of actually sitting there reading an audiobook, because that's just what works better for her. So her sitting with the family doing schoolwork doesn't always work very well. So she has to kind of go off by herself. Whereas the other kids are generally better about sitting together and doing it because they can move around the space that we're in a little better.
So my kids need a lot of movement and being physical too throughout the day. So we incorporated a lot of breaks, a lot of moving around, whether it was taking a break to go outside and jump on the trampoline, or riding bikes in between different subjects, taking time to play with or snuggle with the animals. We also have a lot of fidgets around the house. So even if the kids do need to be doing something where they're sitting down, if I'm reading out loud, this was mainly when they were younger, not so much now, but if I was reading to them, or even if they were just sitting down doing math work, having a fidget in one hand so that they could keep in some way keep moving was huge for them. Also, gum is very popular around here too. If they can keep their mouth moving, that's very helpful. I have to say that our homeschool day has evolved a lot. It's ever changing. The kids change, the kids get older, their interests change, their needs change. So, you know, I started out doing school at home, like I had mentioned, and that just wasn't going to work. You know, the reason I pulled them out was because they needed something different. So where we were doing a lot of sit down work in the beginning, you know, and I was kind of telling them, I was playing teacher and kind of working throughout the day with them. I actually found that it worked best if I could just make a list of everything that we needed to accomplish during the day, and let my kids have it and sort of let them work independently when they wanted to, and then work with me when they needed to, either when they needed help or when we were all doing a subject together. That has changed a lot for us this year. One, because my 10th grader went back to public school. So now it's just my son and I, and he has completely taken over his schedule and has decided that he would like to do work like in the middle of the night. When I'm getting ready to go to bed, he wants to do the work for the next day. And while that is not ideal, I am so happy that he has sort of taken charge and said, this is what's going to work for me. And especially this year during the pandemic, kind of anything goes. If it's working, then that's what we're going to do. So I'm actually really happy that he's sort of taken charge, and he's more independent now than he has been in previous years. But, you know, we don't always get everything accomplished that we want to during the day. Almost always there's one or two subjects that we just get to the afternoon, and I'm like, I'm done, or they're done. So that actually led us to homeschool year round, where in the beginning we wanted to be, or the kids wanted to stay on the school schedule. They wanted to have their summers off. They wanted to have weekends off. I found that it was actually less pressure on us if we just said, okay, we're just going to spread this out through the whole year. And where they had been hesitant before to do any sort of academic work during the summer, they weren't anymore. They were happy to sort of you know, do a little less work Monday through Friday and then tackle a subject, maybe one subject on the weekend or during the summer. So that is what worked best for us.
So based on your kind of teaching style, your kids' learning style, you just kind of will stumble upon your homeschooling style. There are a lot of different official styles. There's everything from unschooling, Charlotte Mason, traditional, Montessori, classical. There's all sorts of styles that will fit different families' needs. Many homeschoolers start out with a style. Like, I thought I was going to be an unschooler. I'm totally not. I buy curriculum. So you can learn more. There's a link to read about these different styles, because I think it can be helpful to read about them and kind of see where you feel like you might fit. We also have a styles discussion posted on our Facebook group that specifically focuses mostly on unschooling and a little Charlotte Mason or literature and eclectic, which is like a mixture of styles. But I think the most important thing to remember is to be flexible and to realize that your style is probably going to evolve over time as your kid grows, as your needs shift. Like for me, things change when I have like a baby or a toddler in the house. So yeah, you just have to remember that flexibility is key in homeschooling.
Yeah, and you don't have to pick one style and identify with it and never veer from it. In fact, most homeschoolers I know identify as eclectic, and I think that's because it's such a huge umbrella and you can fit all sorts of things under it. So say for your family, for your child, you want some explicit math instruction, like you want a curriculum, you want workbooks, but maybe you want to discover science outside on family hikes, and you want to go to the library and load up on like historical fiction to learn history, and you want to writing through practical things like writing grocery lists and everyday tasks and things like that. That can be a style. That can be your family style. You don't have to say, "Ooh, this sounds perfect. Let's only do this," and then feel like you are not being true to this style if you veer from it. So if it's working for you, that's really all you need to worry about.
Rebecca, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. I thought I unmuted myself, but so curriculum. I think a lot of people jump in and they want a book to tell them what to do, and they want the best one. We all want that. It doesn't exist. I'm sorry. there is no best one. And there's nothing wrong with wanting that backup. We use curriculum. I like having, a plan set out for me. It's less work for me to do. There is, like I said, there is no one best curriculum. What is going to be best for you is what's going to work best for your family, your kid, and it might change. So the thing is, this curriculum is not cheap. I mean, there are some free curriculums and there are some free resources. But if you just go out and buy curriculum for everything, you could spend a lot of money and then possibly find that it doesn't work. So before you do that, ask yourself some questions and do some research. If you, for example, ask yourself, do you even want curriculum, or do you want to be unschoolers, life schoolers? Do you need or want curriculum for every subject? Or like I said earlier, do you just want one for a couple of things? Do you want a curriculum that covers everything? Like you want it to cover, math and science and history and writing and reading and everything? Or do you want to pull them together yourself? Like maybe there's just this reading curriculum that you really like, but you love this math one over here. You can put them together too. In fact, that's what we do. Do you want something that comes with workbooks? Do you want something that's mostly book lists and discussion questions? Do you want something that's full of activities or very crafty? So look at all of those things before you find what you've decided you really want and just grab it, because it can, there's a lot to curriculum.
I use boxed curriculums, and I have since the beginning, but one thing I did was I bought it used so that it was less of an investment. And I still find for my family, buying a curriculum that's boxed, that has like history and literature and language arts together. We do science and math separately, but I think that buying curriculum for us works because I have a lot of kids and I don't have a lot of time to be creative and make up lesson plans and stuff for well, okay, I'm not really doing much for my 2 and 4 year olds, but you know what I mean? Like, I just don't have that much time. And there's a lot of homeschoolers who might work from home or out of the home, where it might be a little bit easier if they can kind of open and go with a boxed curriculum. So you just really have to see these different kinds, get an idea, do some research to really see what might work best for you.
So I just want to reiterate quickly what Rebecca said about not rushing to buy a curriculum, only because that can get really expensive. And I know this from experience, unfortunately. You know, sometimes when you're talking to homeschoolers, they will say that their child loved something or it worked really well for them. And that will lead you to believe that it is the best. It is the best math curriculum. It's the best science curriculum. That's not necessarily true. I mean, some curriculums are going to work for some kids and they're not going to work for others. So I really hope that people will talk to other homeschoolers, talk to a lot of homeschoolers, talk about a lot of different curriculums before you make the decision to buy. You know, it happened with us where I bought a few things that were actually very expensive and they just didn't work. They just weren't going to work for my kids. And so, you know, we had 3 or 4 or 10 pages filled out, and then we just shelved it because it just wasn't going to work. So take the time. It's really worth it. You don't have to have a curriculum right now. So don't feel like there's any rush. There's, you know, you can read books and watch documentaries for a long time before you need a curriculum if you want to get one. So take your time. One thing that I did want to mention about curriculum is that homeschool curriculum generally falls into mainly 2 kind of 3 categories, and that is, it is either secular or it's religious. And I just want you to become familiar with those terms before you buy a curriculum, because people don't always tell you. A secular curriculum is not from any religious perspective, where a religious curriculum is generally in the homeschool world, that means that it's coming from a Christian perspective. So you may want to definitely pick out either a religious or a secular curriculum, but you definitely want to do a little research and find out, you know, if you're interested in a certain curriculum, you will want to know whether or not that's religious or secular. There is a 3rd category that's known as faith neutral. And all that means is that there are a few usually secular curriculums. They call themselves secular, but what they'll actually do is just completely leave out something like evolution. If it's kind of a controversial topic, then they just will completely leave it out. And that's important to know too, because you know, there are certain things that you just don't want to completely leave out of homeschooling. So if you end up with a faith neutral curriculum, you'll want to sort of supplement from a different curriculum, or just books in the library is fine too.
So I know we're getting short on time, but I do want to say something that I feel is really important. The curriculum is not the boss of your homeschool. That's so important. And I feel like a lot of people have, myself included, have fallen trapped in that trap. So it feels like you've spent the money on this book that tells you what to do, this book that has a plan and a scope and sequence, and it's, you know, it's got everything, and you feel like you have to do what it tells you to do because that's why you bought it. That's why you got it in the first place. No, 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 no. So the curriculum is to help you. It is not there to dictate your homeschool. If something is not working, or if you feel it's going over material that your kid already understands, or if it's explaining something in a way that's confusing to your child and they get it and you feel like this is just muddying the waters, or if you just plain don't want to do it, like maybe there's an activity that there's, sounds like it would be great, but you and your kid just don't want to, skip it. If it's a horrible fit for your family, toss it. It is there to work for you. So don't be afraid to make it do that. And one last thing, the Connecticut Homeschool Alliance has a file in our Facebook group with loads of curricula separated by ages and subjects. So you can join and check that out.
So I'm just going to kind of fly through this because we're nearing the end. So a lot of people supplement their homeschool curriculum or not curriculum with other things like classes and other experiences. So like my family, we've done a gym class at the YMCA where my kids got to rock climb and learn to swim. We've done art classes. We've done classes at the nature center locally. We've done Varsity Tutors has some free classes online. So because of COVID, we've done some free online classes. The Facebook files, the CHA files, have a ton of resources by county, day trips that you could do. Some of this obviously is going to have to wait until this coronavirus chills out, but there's a ton of stuff out there that you can do. Libraries, I would say, are a super valuable resource. Obviously, there's tons of different things, everything from book clubs and game nights and finding books you need on any subject, but some are even now doing more homeschool focused activities. So my daughter's taking a creative writing course with Rebecca's library, actually, because it's on Zoom, so we can do that. And my library in Meriden is going to have a homeschool social hour coming up. So there's a lot out there. So I don't know if any of the other people want to chime in on what you guys do to supplement your learning at home, other panelists.
I think we're getting kind of tight on time. So I would say we do basically what Casey said, a lot of the same stuff. So we can move on. So connecting with other homeschoolers, this is a really tough thing right now because of the pandemic. Connecting in person is not necessarily a safe thing to do. But there are a lot of ways that you can connect with other homeschoolers and your community. So the first thing is a co-op. A co-op is a small community of homeschoolers gets together, usually in person, to do something or learn something. Like some might be academic or more naturey or more into self-directed learning or only do field trips. Because of COVID right now, some of them are online. So if that's a concern for you, you can certainly look for online classes, co-ops, things like that. They're a great way to find your people and make friends and just expand your homeschooling circle. But other ways you could connect with people right now, you could reach out to your family. Maybe you have, I don't know, an uncle who loves history or your mom's a gardener, and they could get on Zoom with your kids and talk to them about their hobbies, their interests. And that's a great way for your kids to spend time with their family and learn something. Like Casey said, libraries are doing all sorts of things. My son is having a blast in that writing class with Casey's daughter. There's quite a lot of things that you can do virtually right now.
So one of the things that my daughter took upon herself to do is that she got a couple of her friends together and they Zoom and do their math together. They totally planned it on their own. They set up Zoom and then they sit there and do their workbooks together and chat a little bit, but they're getting their work done like they would be if they were at a study table together. So that's been nice that they are creating opportunities for themselves.
Yeah, we've also been using messenger kits for the kids to just talk and communicate, and with other kids, connect with them, Zoom, meetups, and family. Yeah.
My son also likes Facebook Messenger, and it's teaching him to type and spell. So there you go. And last, Facebook communities can help you connect virtually and in person once it becomes safe to do so. The Connecticut Homeschool Alliance does have a Facebook group. I think the link's been posted a couple of times. Go ahead, join, ask whatever questions you have, check our files, connect with the community. And to plug us and the library one more time, we have another event coming up next week here on Zoom with the Mark Twain Library. So check with Elaine to sign us up. So if you have any questions, I know we've had at least one question in the chat. Please go ahead, write it down now. I know we don't have a ton of time, but we can answer it the best we can.
So the question in the chat is, what is a portfolio review? Is this a review of our homeschool curriculum? Somebody want to take that?
Do you
So
want me
I'll
to, do you want me to answer it?
go ahead, Cecilia, and then I'll talk after you.
Portfolio review is simply, they will see what you are using or teaching, and what you bring them anything. It's what you have used, lessons. If it's a drawing, that drawing was part of your lessons that you had that year. In some states, it is required to do a portfolio review, but here you don't have to do that. So you can decline to do that. And I have never done a portfolio review. I've never been asked to do a portfolio review by the school district. But it's just, yeah, it's like they want to see what it is that you have done throughout the year. Anything that you used counts as a portfolio, as part of your portfolio.
So the only thing I was going to mention is that, like Cecilia, I've never done a portfolio review. No one has ever contacted me about a portfolio review, and I don't know anybody who has done a portfolio review. When I did ask other parents about it, the only suggestion I was given is to just bring in kind of one thing from each subject that you had covered with your child, and that was it. You're basically just showing them kind of a snapshot of your homeschool year, and they can't do anything about it. Like if you even choose to do it, they're just looking at it. That's it. They don't give grades. They don't tell you you can't homeschool anymore. They're just simply looking at it and then sending you on your way.
Here's another question. What do you need to give the state of Connecticut to show you are completing requirements?
I'll take that. You don't have to give them anything. It's really easy to homeschool in Connecticut. Like we said, you don't have to sign the notice of intent. If you do, and they ask you to do a portfolio review, you can decline. You are not required to do it, even if you have signed a notice of intent, which again, you don't have to do that in the first place. So there really is no process by which that you show them that you're completing requirements. You just do what you do, and that's about it.
I'll also mention, this hasn't come up in questions, but I know a lot of homeschoolers are interested in knowing, like, how are you issued a diploma, after your child has completed 12th grade, or, everything that they need for high school. You actually issue a diploma if you want to, or more importantly, what you need to do is you need to come up with a transcript for everything that your child has done for high school, and the credits that they have earned and the grades that you've been given. That's what colleges will be interested in, is your transcript, actually, not a diploma.
So we just started homeschooling our first grader this year, and she has become less independent and more needy. Is this normal?
Yes.
I would say yes. Hi, here's mine is trying to come onto the camera right now. 1 second, sweetie. Yeah, a first grader is going to be really needy at home, and they're adjusting and they're getting used to it. And I wouldn't really worry about it, because pretty soon you're going to be like, hi, can you come do this we're trying to do science. And he's going to go, no, thank you. I'm building my own robot. I will let you know how it's going. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, I would like to add, if the child is coming out from school, my oldest did kindergarten and finished kindergarten, and we started in first grade. It will take time. It does take time to for them to get used. It's new. They are, I would say that they behave a little like they're lost, so they get very clingy. But this is why I think that it's so important to deschool, because during that time you can start to get into a routine, seen in a, not in a very obvious way, and you give them time to get used to this new normal. You give yourself time to, understand, well, and get to know your child really. I mean, they've been in school, they spent so much time in school, how they learn, what they need. And a lot of the time during that first year, they really need you, like a lot. They do get very needy. They really do. And it is a transition. And I feel so, it's so bummed that right now with COVID, it's so hard to, you can't be with other homeschoolers, but it was thanks to other homeschoolers that were there, that I was able to, connect the dots sometimes, because I was like, is this normal? That is totally, it's normal to ask, is this normal, a lot of the time. In our group, the Connecticut Homeschool Alliance, you can ask anything. Nothing is, is this, I used to feel like, I'm sorry for asking this, but no, ask away. Homeschoolers were always happy to help.
So I want to chime in too. My kids have never been in school, and I have a first grader who is very clingy, sometimes more than her 3-year-old brother. So I think it's totally age appropriate whether or not they've been in school. And given the circumstances of just the uncertainty of what's going on, I think that amps it up a little bit as well.
I know that we're out of time. I just wanted to add really quickly that our first year was really rough. It was a lot of big emotions from the kids and me. It was a very bumpy ride, but you can see, I think that it's really helpful when you start to see positive things happen, even if they're just really tiny, after a few weeks, after a month, after 3 months. Like, you start to see little positive things that help you know that you're moving in the right direction. And then you also have setbacks. So, homeschool, your days, months, and years are ever changing. So, in the beginning, it was very, very bumpy for us. I wasn't even sure we would be able to do it longer than a year, but you find your routine and you get comfortable in some ways, and then things get a little bit easier.
Well, thank you, ladies. If there aren't any more questions, I just want to say thank you for sharing your experiences and your expertise, your knowledge. It's been very helpful, I think, to all the parents out there. And we are looking forward to having you join us again a week from tonight at 7:30 on the 29th. And we're going to be discussing creating an inclusive curriculum. So I hope everybody will come back and join us then for more information. And I hope people will take advantage of all the resources that you guys have to offer everyone. So thank you for joining us.